kink is sort of seen as alternative or, fringe or just this, this other thing. But when you really pull people and look at what kink is and everything that it encompasses, because it's so much, it's like the majority of people are kinky in some way. I'm going to dive right in. I think that one of the most common questions that I got, and there were about 5 or 6 questions that asked this in this, in one way or another, is how do you start out? There were a couple people who were already in relationships and they are maybe craving more of a dominant submissive dynamic. And they're like, how do I open up to my partner about this? I've been dropping hints about it and they're maybe not picking up what I'm putting down, was one of the questions. And maybe if you can start with that, I'll pop a few of the other questions in there if we don't cover it.
Sure. I think generally this kind of thing is one of the reasons why I started doing this whatever this is, this having this kind of outlet or this kind of representation of myself online, because I started doing memes because I was seeing kind of funny, accessible memes about things that it really seemed to help discussion and just representation, and that might be another way. I've had messages from people before that have told me that they use my memes to start conversations. So they will send a particular meme to their partner and be like, ? That's all they'll say, because it's basically like, what about this? There's something in that meme, whether it's a type of play or a type of dynamic or a direct kind of reference to a task or a punishment. And they can use that as a fun shorthand, because often the memes are kind of funny or kind of silly or entertaining. So a lot of it is about taking the tension out and remembering that this is a fun, playful thing. And if you do want to start a relationship dynamic, then obviously that is quite serious. It's important to treat it, as a serious thing. But it also is a fun thing. So I think a lot of it is taking the tension out. So maybe I would say, to keep it a fun way, have a look at my memes on my page and pick one out that you like and just, send it to your partner and ask them what they think about it. And that at least will start a conversation about the general topic. And that might naturally lead into like, have you ever done something like that? And I have thought about it, and then you just naturally find yourself with a plan to try something out.
I think this is brilliant. Just pretty much leave the heavy lifting up to the funny dom.
Well, I am a service, so I like to lift heavy things for others.
Yeah. No, I think I would have never thought of this honestly, but it's kind of a no-brainer. It's a really good way to break the ice and keep things light, as you're saying. And you said this back in our first episode together, kink space can seem really heavy, but you obviously, being the funny dom, like to bring the levity back to it. And I think that's so important because thinking about being on the receiving end of that for myself, I know that a lot of times I bring these conversations to my husband and I'm like, let's talk about this. And he's always like, I have no idea what you're going to say next. And sometimes things can feel like there's a lot of pressure, but your memes are so funny. So what I'm hearing is just send a text message that's like, what do you think about this? And it really puts the ball in their court, but without a lot of pressure.
Yeah, exactly. If you treat it as we have something to talk about, that does make most people anxious. But if you treat it as an opportunity, the same way you would if a movie came out that you really wanted to see, and you might send your partner the trailer for the film, be like, Friday night? It's a tense issue. Like you just want to start the conversation. And if you do want to engage in an actual kind of fundamental dynamic, so you actually want to add this to your relationship, and that's a work in progress. That's something to kind of talk to eventually. But right off, if you really have no idea where they stand with this kind of thing, then I think something a bit lighthearted, or even then watching a movie together, like the new Netflix movie that Love and Leashes was very sweet, or the classic Secretary with Maggie Gyllenhaal. Like if you just kind of like watch one of those movies so you can kind of talk about it, to kind of gauge their kind of, position or attitudes, and because it really is a conversation. And a lot of people, if you haven't thought about it a lot, or you haven't engaged in it or have much experience, you haven't thought about it enough to really decide what you think. You just have general like, oh, I don't know about that, or that's strange, isn't it? Like, you don't really have your own opinion yet until you start engaging with it. So it's really just starting the conversation, and it's a fun conversation.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you can think that you know what you like or what you want, but until you actually do it, you can't really form an opinion because you're sort of just judging someone else's experience that you've either heard of or seen. Yeah.
It's unfortunately how most people live. I feel like most people are in their lifestyle, especially sexually, are really just giving themselves what they feel is the normal thing, and treating that as what is good. And they're not really consciously trying to explore what they like, and really trying to make that the priority. And I think that's a huge, huge problem in all relationships, like whether it's vanilla or kink. I think that's a big, big thing. And it's a thing that we kind of like fundamentally rail against in kink, because your whole mandate is to explore your own needs and wants and what you are about. And if you don't do that, you can't be a good kinkster, because you don't know yourself and what you need. How can you know someone else and what they need, and how can you be compatible if you don't know what your actual identity is? So it's really geared towards figuring all that shit out. So even if you're not a kinky person, there's a lot of things to learn, I think, from dynamics and kink.
Absolutely. And just to kind of touch on what you were saying, it's so interesting that, I think that still as a concept or as, a way of lifestyle or sex style, whatever you want to call it, kink is sort of seen as alternative or, fringe or just this, this other thing. But when you really pull people and look at what kink is and everything that it encompasses, because it's so much, it's like the majority of people are kinky in some way. They maybe just don't know it, or they're not identifying that way, or they're not exploring or practicing. And so then they don't think that they are. But deep down, I think almost everyone is. I mean, I did some polls before we did this episode, and sure, a lot of people that, listen to my content or follow me might already, because they are in those realms. But I have a lot of followers who are monogamous and who don't identify that way. And it was overwhelming. It was like 93% of people said that they want kinkier sex. Yeah. And I polled my group, or I got a lot of responses from people who follow my other work, the journey that's not really focused on polyamory or open relationships too. And so that was very telling, even for me, which I'm already like, everybody's kinky, but I was like, wow, everybody really is kinky. Maybe just not practicing.
I think it's what it stands for as well. So, I mean, I wouldn't hazard to believe that 93% of people are full actual submissives or dominants or switches or pets or whatever their identity is. But I think 93% of people, if not 100%, definitely want more exploring. They definitely want more communication. They definitely want more intensity, more connection. And these are all like the absolute fundamentals of dynamic relationships. And I think that's what people are drawn to. They just have whatever the relationship they have, whatever they've experienced, is not that. It's not very trusting. It's not very connected. It doesn't value communication, and this does. And so it's very attractive just fundamentally. If on top of that you like being restrained and spanked or clamped or verbal degradation and all these things, and they just start, then yeah, that's the rabbit.
Oh, me?
Yeah, I could see your eyes lightening up as I started listing.